Charles, another Friday. What's up, my brother?
What's going on, Leslie? Happy Friday to you.
Man, happy Friday to you. Look, let's just hit it. We got a big subject to talk about today. We are, as of May 31st through June 1st, we celebrated the 100th year anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street, a lot of names for it. And we're going to dive all into that today. So that's what we're going to deal with today. And we're going to undress that. We're going to look at it from different angles. And we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into the main topic, Charles, why don't you set the table for us?
Well, think about slavery. And we've talked about what happened after slavery. And one way to kind of set the table is regional. Where did people go after slavery? And what opportunities were available after slavery? And then what was the climate between race relations after slavery? Remembering that slavery was about forced labor, which generated millions and millions and millions of dollars. And now no longer are there slaves forced into labor. And so that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is those people who were forced into labor, taking it upon themselves to learn how to read in darkness, usually from one book, the Bible.
Yeah.
And having to hide that they were able to read and learning how to write. And, my hero, my all-time hero, Harriet Tubman, freeing slaves before the slaves were freed on the Underground Railroad. That type of ingenuity and imagination to be able to lift themselves out of horrible, deathly conditions, and then to thrive. We talked about South Carolina a couple months ago, and so that's one of the places where people who were freed from slavery, we saw high education, high political savvy. And then Oklahoma, bright minds, learning how to turn those forced labor issues of agriculture and the money that comes from agriculture into banking and systems where Black people started to thrive in the Greenwood area of Tulsa. And so what does that look like when you have people who are used to having money coming in, no longer having that money coming in? But not only that, they see the people who were making that money, making their own money, creating their own legacy, being able to build something that was going to be sustained. And so it's commonly known as Black Wall Street, but that's because there was a large concentration of Black people who were starting to become affluent and learning systems and putting systems into place and showing great savvy with those systems. And then it all came crashing down.
I think, Charles, you've done a good job of setting it up. We hear people, it's become popular to make references to Black Wall Street, right? That phrase has become popular, but a lot of people don't really understand and know what that really means. Even today, as of Sunday, I think it was Sunday, or maybe it was Monday night, there was a great documentary that was actually executive produced by LeBron James and Maverick Carter called Dreamland that aired on CNN that talked about Black Wall Street in its entirety. And it was a well put together documentary that really covered it much deeper. And I wanted to kind of take us back a bit. So I pulled a little bit of research. So when you think about Black Wall Street, the first thing I want to clear up, we call it Black Wall Street, but what is Black Wall Street? And in fact, the
Right,
title
right.
I've heard the noise, but what is what was Black Wall Street? When you think of Black Wall Street, you can't talk about Black Wall Street and not say the word Greenwood Avenue.
That's right.
Because Black Wall Street is actually Greenwood Avenue in the Greenwood community section of Tulsa. That was Black Wall Street, and then it got the name. So Black Wall Street has become the popular name, but the name actually was Greenwood Avenue, aka it started being called Black Wall Street because of the affluency and really what they had built. So, but I want you to know that Black Wall Street is the real name is Greenwood Avenue. And then if you did further Greenwood community. So if you ever get a chance to go to Tulsa, go to that Greenwood community. Now it's a shell of what it once was, 3 major streets, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. And if you really go even deeper, Charles, and study the history of how the Gap Band got its name,
Yeah,
you'll find the title GAP, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
that's right.
That's deeper. But I mean, so the context of Black Wall Street, let's start there. I want you to know what it is. It is Greenwood Street. And that was the most prominent street of that community. It was Greenwood Avenue. That's where you wanted to be. And so when we talk about that, let's first go back and talk about why was it so successful. We know that it was successful. It had luxury shops and theaters and hotels, and all this was owned by African Americans. But let's talk about why it was successful, because if we understand that trend, and I'm speaking specifically to African Americans today because we really need to grasp the lesson here. If we truly understand the trend of why Black Wall Street was successful, then we will very easily be able to look and see why every other ethnic group has been able to be, or every other race has been able to be successful at a greater state than African Americans have post segregation. So I mean post segregation. So let me set this up, Charles, and then I'll kick it over to you to get your thoughts. So when we think about at that time, we're talking about 1921 is when the actual massacre happened, and we'll talk about that part a little bit later. But when we think about that period of when this territory was founded, because Greenwood was actually Indian territory, and it was founded in a really significant year to me for a lot of other reasons, but it was 1906, Charles. That community.
I'm not biting on that. Go ahead with what you're talking about.
Yeah, I finished. But when you think about why it was so successful at that time, in that time of era, a lot of blacks work domestically, they work in other sectors. But you couldn't spend your money. You could go work downtown Tulsa, but you couldn't spend your money down there. In fact, you had to go to a colored bathroom. Sometimes it was 3 or 4 blocks away. You had to walk to this one building and go use the restroom. So because you couldn't spend your money there, then these business owners created businesses in this community called Greenwood, and that's where the prominent was. So you spent your money there. So they had a captive audience because that money was circulating in the Black community at that time over and over and over before it decirculated. So that means if your money is spending in any community, if it's circulating over 20 times before it leaves your community, you're going to be very prosperous and very affluent.
Talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
I know that ties. I know where you're going, but just talk about that concept of circulating money in the community. And we know it was very different then than it is now, because we did the economic disparities conversation. But just give a refresher on there.
Yeah. So if you think about, let me break it down in this term. So when you get your paycheck, here's how you think about it. When you get your paycheck and you start expending funds, how long does it take you that you spend your money with someone, a business, or representation that are not within your own community? And for most of us, that's a matter of seconds.
All right. So let's do it like this, because that sounds real technical, and it's Friday, so let's lighten it up a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
So let's say that I have $1 and I have a choice. I have a choice between buying penny candy at Miss Jeanette's or at Walmart.
Great analogy.
Which one is circulating?
Miss Jeanette's was circulating. And here's what that means. If I go spend it with Miss Jeanette, then now that money is circulating in the community. And so guess what? When the community needs a sponsorship for the Little League team, or somebody needs this, that sponsorship is going to come from Miss Jeanette. So now that money is circulating again within that same community.
Small Black-owned business.
So now everybody is circulating the money within the same circle that creates a greater momentum and wealth for the entire circle. Right. If I go and spend that dollar at Walmart, now it's out of my community and it's going to go from this store to Walmart corporate. It will never recirculate back in my community.
Right.
Not at that level. And so when you do that enough, like right now, the amount of time, and I gave the stats on this, but in the white community, it circulates over 26 times before it leaves. Asian community around 20, Hispanic community is between 14 and 16, and the African American community is 6 hours. And really, that 6 hours is only because you're at work and you got to wait till you get up.
Right. So the money is coming in. Money is coming in, and then instead of circulating, it's going right back out.
Absolutely. And then when you look at the stats, as African Americans, we make up less than 12% of the U.S. population, but we spend more than the entire population.
Right.
So how's that?
Right. So that brings us right back to Greenwood, and why the circulating principle is what made that area so prosperous and such a threat to white Oklahoma.
Absolutely, because at that time it was reversed as it is now. So I made my money within another community. They would not allow me to spend my money in that community. So I spent my money in the community in which I lived. So now when I spend my money with the shoe shine guy, he buying his supplies from Burke's that's down the street with his business. Burke buying his supplies from the other. Burke's attorney is the attorney on the corner. You see what's happening?
Yeah, and then the banking. You couldn't take your money. You could make money in the white community, but the white bank was not going to accept it. So there you go.
Yeah. So when it came to getting a loan for a business, all those things, the banks was in that community. They gave loan to the businesses. All of that was infused. So the reason why I say if we learn that lesson, even today, it's not saying you can't spend your money out of your community, but we always wonder why our businesses don't grow at the same rate of other communities, why things in our communities don't flourish at the same speed of other communities. Is this simple principle. Look at how other communities manage their money and how they spend their money within their communities. I'll give you a simple example. This is Friday, right, Charles?
Yep.
Just go out and survey any restaurant tonight. Here's what I want you to watch. You just go out and survey, and if you were sitting and you had a counter, and you look and you do a counter at any restaurant at the end of the night, you say, how many African Americans spent money here? In a non-African American establishment, how many African Americans spent money here? How many of this race? How many of this race? And then you go in a restaurant in the African American community and do the same thing. I guarantee you're going to see a much higher number of African Americans spending their money outside of their community than you will find in any other race spending money outside of theirs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and with the amount of money that we spend, it's not the same concentration of black businesses as there was in Greenwood at that time. So that meant the whole street, the money is going up and down that street by necessity, because those are the people that you could buy meat from the grocery store, or vegetables, or rice. That's where you got a pair of shoes from.
Yeah. Hey, I got one even for you, Charles. Guess who you paid your rent to? Guess who the landlord was?
Tell it.
You know, not only the landlord, guess who your CPA was? Guess who
Mm-hmm.
your plumber was? Guess who your carpenter was?
Your doctor.
Your doctor. See,
Yeah.
all of that was self-contained
Right.
at that time because we were not allowed to do business outside our communities. We were allowed to work and be domestic and make money, but we're not allowed to spend that money. And so the only difference between our progression or regression as composed to other races and how they have achieved it faster is they've maintained this same principle and we totally deviated coming post integration. We lost the basics. We forgot the basics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and then that becomes a threat because there's a large thriving community. You know, there's always going to be politics in every community, but there's also the issue of land. What happened to the land? And so,
Yeah.
not only were there landlords, there were landowners in that Greenwood community.
Yes. Well, and I think that's the whole point, the bigger part of community. When you lead to all of your ownership ties, those ownership ties are within the community. So that doctor and lawyer that you went to lived in that same community at Greenwood. Their
Right.
business was in that same community at Greenwood. When you went to Burt's and you know, Burt's had the best suit and clothing store, whatever it was, the owners lived in that community. The employees lived in that community. So that's, and I don't think everybody gets that, and there's some confusion on that. They say, "Well, I spend in my community." No, you got to trace the dollar. Where's the ownership of the dollar?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we mean when we say community. It's the ownership of the dollar, not just the business, because we have to be smarter and we have to be just as smart. And actually, we can learn a lesson from every other race. It's because every other race has done well with it. We have not.
Yeah.
And that was the premise of why we were so successful and why Greenwood community was so successful in that period from 1906 to 1921.
A good time to open it up for questions. We got any comments, questions? What we got going on?
Yeah, let me go to the chat. Drop your questions in, family. I sure miss our intern,
Oh yeah.
but she is headed out to do big things this summer.
That's right.
Um, Curtis Johnson's in the room. I see Willie May is in the room. Come on in, guys. Pop your questions in there as we think about Black Wall Street and talk about it. I'll give you a few minutes to dive into that. The other thing, Charles, that people kind of get mixed up about, they say, well, and I heard of Black Wall Street, but what's the Tulsa Massacre? Guys, they're very connected to each other because the massacre is the end. That was the termination of what was Black Wall Street in Greenwood. That ended up in 1,000 homes being burned, businesses being burned to the ground, and all those businesses being destroyed, and over 300 to 400 African Americans primarily killed. And we'll get into that and set up the story of that. But I definitely encourage you all to watch the documentary called Dreamland. They aired on CNN. That was executive produced by LeBron James and his business partner, Maverick Carter. They did a great job with it. I will give you a little Charles backlog, and I don't know if you've had a chance to watch it yet, Charles. But I
hadn't. I hadn't watched it, but I'm very familiar with Greenwood.
Well, here's the interesting thing, because I asked myself as I'm waiting on the questions to come in, kind of how did this, like, what was the catalyst that sparked this that night, right?
Mm-hmm.
On May 31st in 1921. And so in research and even in the documentary, they covered it. And I won't call the exact name. They give you the exact names in the documentary. I don't have them in front of me, and I don't want to miscall them. But I will give you the scenario. There was this gentleman, and it's probably no different than a gentleman we all know. He was a fly, cool brother, but he worked at a shoe shine location in downtown Tulsa, the white section of Tulsa. There was not restroom facilities for African Americans in the shop that he worked in, and his owner had made arrangements for them to go to the colored bathroom that was in a building like 3 blocks away on the fourth floor. On this particular day, he goes down to use the restroom, and he gets to the building and he goes up to the fourth floor. Now he's on the first floor waiting to the elevator so he can go to the fourth floor. Here's what to set it up. Back in those days, elevators were not as they are now. There was a person that had to manually operate that elevator and crank that elevator up. And it was very difficult to get those elevators level with the floor where you could just walk on it. It's not like today. Again, you got to go back and watch an old movie. It was different. Well, there was a lady, I know her first name was Sarah, a white lady, that was the elevator operator that day, this particular day. Because that floor wasn't level, it is believed that when the gentleman was walking in the elevator to go up to the fourth floor, he tripped. And when he tripped, he fell forward into her and grabbed onto her, and it ended up ripping her clothing, and she screamed. She screamed. And when she screamed, he took off. Because you got to think about the time. We're talking about 1921. He takes off because he's like, this is not going to be good. As he's leaving, the gentleman that worked at the drugstore in that same building on the first floor, all he sees, he hears the scream, and he sees this black man running away. Calls the police. The police come in, investigate it. They don't do anything. They, realize, what happened is probably not an issue. Later that day, at that time, the paper was everything. That's how you got your news.
Mm-hmm.
The Tulsa paper ran, and it came out of the press at about 3:30 that afternoon. It ran a story with the headlines, "This gentleman attacks and attempts to rape," and he actually called her like Miss Sarah, whatever it was, while she was so diligently working her job at such and such building. That was the catalyst. So they went and arrested this gentleman, had him in jail, and that night a mob, now you got to think about this, they organized and did this very quickly. A mob gathered at the jail. A mob of angry white men. They were armed and they were gunned. At this time, there was also a group of veterans who had come back from fighting the war that went down, about 75 of them, that went down to the sheriff, to the jailhouse as well. And they went down and told the jail, look, we came down just to offer our support and protection to protect the prisoner, from the mob. They were armed, all veterans. He said, I don't need your help. Get the heck out of my jail.
Right.
So as they were leaving, this white gentleman got into an altercation with one of the black armed guys that was leaving. And he said, what do you think you're going to do with that gun? He said, I'm going to use it on you if I have to. And then he said, no, you wouldn't. He grabbed it and they got in a tussle and the gun went off. And that started the catalyst of what happened next. And then after that, that mob went over the train tracks right over to Greenwood, and we all know what happened next. The other thing that people don't talk about often is that there were planes, because there were planes that flew over. They got all those private planes and planes they had at their arsenal flew over, and they dropped ammunition from the sky on that community of Greenwood as well. So all this, that's kind of the setup of what tipped the scales and how that happened, and kind of taking us back to that day in 1921. I'm sure if that gentleman could speak, he probably just wish he didn't use the bathroom that day. I mean, but that was the catalyst of that day to try to set it up, Charles.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, at some point, when you think about what should have happened, where was the National Guard? Yeah. I agree with Bird. It's BS.
Yeah.
It's BS because when you think about what should have happened, I mean, as a citizen of the United States, what was the national support? What was the state support? And who thought it was a good idea to deputize the mob?
And there you go. That and you bring up an interesting point. I forgot to talk about that fact. Of all these men that this angry mob that showed up at the jailhouse, these citizens have been deputized by public officials.
Right. So you turn and use the law to break the law.
Right.
Mm.
Got a question, Charles, from Town Shaker.
To change the mindset of people on spending habits.
Oof.
that's a tough one, Curtis. From this standpoint, there's a long running marketing campaign that has infiltrated Black America to think that Black businesses are inferior, and sometimes Black businesses play into those stereotypes by not providing upper echelon services. That doesn't mean that all of them are bad. Most of them, 90, would you say 97, 98, 99% of them are good. But the outliers get most of the attention, and because it reinforces that marketing campaign that Black businesses are not good. And so that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect is at home, what are we talking about?
Mhm.
Because the school is not going to teach you about spending money. That's not something that's in the curriculum because it's not part of the state test. And so I guess what I'm saying is those changes have to come at an early age, and it has to be custom and tradition. You got to actually see what's going on and how it's done so that it can then be reversed systematically. And then there's another wrinkle now because you don't even have to go to the mall or to the store. You don't have to go anywhere now. You just a couple clicks and you have food delivery, grocery delivery, clothing delivery, shoe
Right.
delivery, anything that you can think of, you can order online. And so that's another layer. And actually, I think that's a hidden gem where if we're talking about it constantly, if we're educating about it constantly, you can find those Black businesses and support them instead of just clicking on Amazon all the time.
You know, Charles, you bring up a great point. And as we talk about education, and the audience, I want you to hit us up on that. We here at Urban Law, not only do we have the legal services we provide, but we provide a full service credit program to help you understand, not just fix your credit. Because if that's all what you want to do, go somewhere else. But if you truly want to fix it the right way by having understanding be a part of that process where you understand the rules and you know how to operate, then call us. Reach out to me at 601-340-6800. Go right on our website and book an appointment with me now so I can get you in the program. Here's the difference. I tell people sometimes I can fix your credit in 3 months, but I can't fix it in 3 months because part of your credit is changing your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I can do the technical part of disputing in 3 months, but I can't change your behavior in 3 months. You've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years of your life. And so now you want somebody to immediately flip the light on and change everything that you know and have done for 30 years. You want them to do it in 2 weeks or 3 days. That is the definition of insanity. We have to change our way of thinking. Here's the reality. If I had the luxury of being able to wipe everything clean and starting you at zero, if I don't fix your behavior, if I don't change the way you think, move, and operate, in 2 months, you will be back in a worse position than you were when you came. That's why I don't just fix your credit. I fix you for life, and it's about changing your behavior. So most of us don't have a credit problem; we have a behavior problem. And in Urban Law, our program is designed to change the behavior. There, and fixing your credit is just a byproduct of our program.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and speaking of Black Wall Street, we have to consciously be talking about ways to collaborate I'll give you an example. You did this for me. Um, even though we're partners in business, you didn't have to, but you did this for me. Uh, a group of my fraternity brothers, we have Black Street um, as an investment and education vehicle, and you came and spoke to us about ways to expand our thought process. Without those type of meetings and those type of collaborations, we will never change just straight spending habits because it's too easy. I mean, it's just like going to Vegas. I mean, they want you to gamble, so it's set up to funnel you to the gambling.
Right.
You know.
Look, and here's the thing: we all have weaknesses and we all have blind spots. For me, everybody knows my blind spot is sweets. So don't expect me to think rational. You're gonna send me into a candy store. Yeah, somebody better go with me. I'm gonna be a little weak. I'm gonna be a little weak in the candy store. But now you can send me to a steakhouse all day long. I'm the one to go to the steakhouse and never order the steak.
Yeah.
So Charles is different. Don't send him to the steakhouse by himself.
That's right.
I gotta go with him. But together we complement each other. So you see how that helps? We complement each other, which makes us both strong. We have to do that collectively in business, and we have to do that as just people. The other thing I would throw a shout out, Chuck, we got to have more patience with each other.
Yeah.
We tend to, in our community, we have a different level of expectation from someone that looks like us than we do of everyone else.
True.
So sometimes there's a small percentage that hit the myth, and they exploit the myth of Black businesses are not as good. But for the most part, if you really dig into it, a lot of times most of your Black businesses do above and beyond what they're really obligated to do, and you take them through changes. Mm-hmm. But you won't take the other group of individuals through the same changes. So that's why I say you gotta be fair, and you gotta evaluate yourselves too. Do I have the same expectations of all people?
That's real talk. You know, we've experienced that, but I think as a business owner, you learn to, especially as a Black business owner, you learn to have your system be excellent. And so, you know, you're not going to please everyone.
Nope.
But that doesn't mean you're not going to try to please everyone.
Right.
And so I think the business owners are further ahead. They're just not getting the support, the circulation of the dollar.
Right.
I give you another example, and this is a small example, but I was looking for different lotion that complemented my skin. Well, you go in Walmart, Target, or if you go a little bit pricier, go to the mall, you can find something. But I said I consciously made a decision that I wanted something from a Black business. I ended up all the way in New York, online shopping, supporting two sisters in Brooklyn. I mean, sometimes it takes, as a consumer, take the time to actually research it, because it may not be available right there in the community where you can touch it. And by the same token, more and more small businesses are popping up in the Black community. It's starting to have a revitalization of small businesses, especially when you can do e-commerce.
Yeah. Well, I think, Charles, the other thing to that, I want to be clear. I'm not telling you you got to spend every dollar you got within a Black business. I'm not saying that. Sometimes it's not feasible if you got to move very quickly and you can't find them. But I'm saying you got to consciously think. You got to consciously think every time you're spending money, what are my options and can I put that in play?
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, if you're consciously thinking about it, you will drastically increase the amount of money that you're recirculating.
That's right.
Because how many of us have been, we grew up, there was a restaurant that was great. Like for me, and I grew up in a small town, you know, Charles, Columbia, Mississippi. Yep. Yay to Columbia. But let me show you some facts on this. So the best burger I ever had, in my opinion, in Columbia, Mississippi, did not come from McDonald's. It came from Jesse's Sweet Shop.
How did I know you were going to say that?
I'm just saying. The best snowball to this day that I ever had came from Jesse's Sweet Shop, and I hadn't had a humdinger since. That was the thing. But watch this. What's the difference between Jesse Sweet Shop and Wars, or Jesse Sweet Shop and McDonald's, or Jesse Sweet Shop and whatever else, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? Over a period of time, at the time when we grew up on Jesse Sweet Shop, we didn't have a McDonald's.
Right.
Self-contained. You see where I'm going? Black Wall Street, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Best sit-down restaurant I used to love to go to was a place called Dog and Suds. I'm just saying. All those places thrive because there was no McDonald's, there was no war at the time, there just was no fast food. What happened when those players showed up? All those other businesses died off. Why? They didn't die off because they didn't have a great product. They died off for simple one thing: volume and support.
Yeah.
We live in an instant society that we want it now. Now it might have taken them 15 minutes to cook that burger, but just gonna cook it right in front of you. You saw it was good, but you want to drive through. We got a drive through mentality, and so we have to recondition the way we think if we're truly going to be successful and move at the magnitude and scale. So when you don't support in volume, small businesses don't have the opportunity to have the resources to scale.
That's right.
What that simply means is small businesses can't get big to offer you more services if you don't support them when they're small, so they can't scale. So they tend to stay the same size, even though they packed and they've been doing great business for years, they still the same size, they haven't grown. It's either two things gonna stop that: small vision or not enough volume of support.
That's right. That's right. I mean, all I can say is that's right, because I mean, in a sense, those marketing dollars that are in the support that you're talking about have created the false narrative that is better than what we have in our community.
Right.
And it may take a little bit longer to get a Stamps burger than it does to get one from Five Guys.
Right.
But the time that you spend, you just think of spending it on love, because the burger is hands down the best.
If I'm in Jackson, when I'm in Jackson and I want a burger, and they did it for me when they added the turkey burger, because I don't really do the beef. Oh, I'm going to Stamps. I'm trying to get. Look at me. I'll see you in a minute. I got to go over here and get over here early before it gets too crowded so I can get my burger.
Yeah, no doubt.
We have to be conscious, and if we start doing that, remember, we're the only race of people that haven't learned or grasped this concept post integration.
Yeah,
we had it in segregation because we were forced to by choice. We were forced to. Post integration, we lost our mind. Everybody else kept playing by the game of building success. Mm-hmm. We didn't. We changed our whole game plan, and we have been stuck in the same place ever since.
Well, I mean, you said a word then. I mean, by force, we were so good at it that they felt threatened by it.
Yeah, we got some comments. I'm going to go to Curtis. Curtis has got some comments, and let's say he says, right, and don't be expecting a hookup all the time. Oh, man.
That's a whole show unto itself, Curtis.
Right. Listen, let me make my plea to the people. God, if you don't go to the other establishments that are not African American and demand a hookup, don't go to the African Americans and demand a hookup. I don't get that. Like, you want the same burger, but you want it free from me, and you want to pay top dollar from Chick-fil-A. That's not the way it works.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by having the same expectations. We got a problem with that, and we got to fix that. And that's a behavior thing.
Yeah.
It's a behavior thing.
We like to try to negotiate, but we only like to negotiate with people that look like us.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Be fair. If you're going to negotiate with everybody.
Yeah.
Then I can respect that. But if you only negotiate with me and you don't negotiate with my competitors, I can't respect it. I mean, because what you're saying is, I don't deem you worthy, or I want you to do more from me than I'm going to expect from other people. I don't want you to eat on Mondays and Tuesdays. I don't want you to eat on Wednesdays and Thursdays. We've got to get better. Got to get better.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because last time I checked, the same amount of time to get a degree to be able to go into business and do the work, it is not set by color.
Right. I mean, and look, it's already stacked against most minority businesses of every group, right? If you look at the funding rates, you look at the programs, you look at, first of all, let's just take one thing I'll take. You typically don't have generational wealth or established contacts set aside in different minority communities that push you in a profitable position from day one. That's usually off the table.
Yeah.
For most minorities of all races that are minorities. Number two, your bank loan rate and funding rate and angel funds and venture capital is much different rate. It's a much lower rate of fundability if you're a minority than it is if you're not, if you're majority. Those are just facts. You ain't got to tell me how you feel on that. That's not based on how I feel. That's just the facts. That can be proven mathematically by the numbers. So the deck is already stacked against. So we have to support. What is the one thing that we fully control as individuals and as a group or a race? And that's our decision making and our behavior. We totally own that. We've got to do better with the things we can't control.
That's right.
And that's what they did in Greenwood. They got very strategic about it. They worked together with it, and they built the most profitable and most affluent community of African Americans still to this day. It's been unmatched and untouched.
That's right.
Now, here's the thing. In 1921, Charles, think about this. In 1921, just the Greenwood community had a population of over 10,000 African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand, if you prorate that to today, how many people that is?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's huge.
10,000 people is more than our hometown.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 1921.
That's right.
So if we build the affluence, it's going to attract more people. And we've just got to build it and work together. So then when, here goes again, if we build in communities like that, and now when Jackson State needs a new stadium or we need this, guess what? The community now, because that money has circulated, you have a lot more people with affluence, and you can raise that money faster at a much higher rate. Don't take it from me. Look around. Yeah. Look at the people that raise it. Look at people do. There's a reason why they do systematically. Look at how their funding mechanism is set up. Look at how they support. Look at how that resources regenerate. Yeah.
Well, I mean, hey, that's a lot. That's a lot to digest. Some of it hurts.
It does, because you realize that we have a part to play in it, right? Yeah. I can't just offset this and blame this on somebody else. I can't blame the totality. In totality, I can't blame it on somebody else. I've got to own part of this.
Yeah.
And we don't always like to own our part.
Well, here's a question I would like to ask you, just moving away from that just a little bit.
All right, go for it.
And this goes back to Brother Bird and his summation of the issue, with it being BS. Why did it take so long to acknowledge what happened in Tulsa? And why is it still not given the full amount of gravity that it should have?
I think you can look at President Biden's comments, and I think he summed it up better than I can. Let me see if I can find that quote because I do want to quote the president correctly. Um,
Yeah, it baffles me. I mean, you've had black community after black community wiped out.
yeah, you know, um, I'm trying to find the exact quote, but I'll find it here in a minute. But he put it really well, and he basically said, I'm gonna find it because I don't want to butcher it. So go ahead, Charles. I'm gonna dig into it, find this out.
I mean, I'm just thinking. I mean, I'm way off topic now, but I'm just thinking about how black communities from the segregationist era were systematically dismantled, whether it was through a massacre, as in Tulsa, or the highway system. You mentioned something, and I guess I'll go back to it now. When you said something that just kind of automatically gets said, and as they went over the tracks, the dividing line back then was the railroad, and
Mm-hmm.
you look at how it went from the railroad to how they dropped those big concrete pillars that support our transportation system, our highways and interstates. Those got dropped in the black community.
Right, right. Now you think you mobilized this in 24 hours because he was arrested the next day.
Yeah.
So here is President Biden's just a couple comments out of his speech that he made the other day. He said, and I quote, "Just because history is silent, it does not mean that it did not take place." He said, "Hell was unleashed, literal hell was unleashed, and now the nation must come to grips with the subsequent sin of denial."
Right.
We can't just choose what we want to know and not what we should know. I come here to help fill the silence because in silence, the wound deepens. He called it out. He called it out. Why has it taken so long? Charles, that's the private $10 billion question.
Yeah.
And I think if I had to take my stab at it, it's easier to operate in denial than to operate in truth.
There was a lot of thieving that went on, though.
Yeah. Well, stealing. Yeah, you're right. Thieving, stealing. I mean, listen, you in one night, do you understand this? You wipe out a whole community, 1,000 homes you burned down?
Yeah.
Explain something to me. Come on now. We ain't talking about one home caught on fire. 1,000 homes. And then the most prominent surgeon that was there, Mr. Gaston, the mob show up at his house. He walks out. He's doing everything they said him to do, and they just shoot him right on his front porch.
Yeah.
So you instantly kill over 300-400, and then it doesn't stop there. You bury them, and they just discovered this a couple of years ago when they got a commission that said they dug up the graves. You bury them in a mass grave.
Yeah.
Just threw them in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think, and this is why America as a whole has been in denial about a lot of things. And that's why you see the sentiment of what with George Floyd. That was just another altercation. George Floyd's death was no different than this young man's interaction that triggered the reaction of that day. It was a boiling point moment that we'll all be able to point to and remember. But it started triggering some reactions.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd been building up, right? Because before George Floyd, there was Breonna Taylor. There were so many, right? Amar Marbury, Belton Jean here. The list goes on and on. So, and then it builds up, and you have one catalyst that is known as the moment that time stood still, that everything changed.
Yeah. I mean, and that's unfortunate, but that's our reality. And so, as we talked about a couple shows back, when you talk about critical race theory, um, it's deeper. You know, it's deeper than just curriculums or
Yeah.
perceptions of aggrievement. These things actually happen, and it wasn't just Greenwood.
No.
It was everywhere that there was a black concentration that was doing well. There was some type of target that was placed on.
You know, I don't know if I see it in my lifetime now, but I as a little boy, it was my hope that I would see it in in my lifetime. The words of Dr. King truly that I would get to see that we as a nation would judge people on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And that hasn't happened so far in my lifetime. In fact, it seems like it's gotten even worse. But humanity, and here's where we got to get humanity is within all of us. All of us represent humanity.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, here's the thing. Here's what I know. If they cut you, you gonna bleed. Your blood gonna be red. If they cut me, my blood gonna be red.
Mm-hmm.
If they cut one of my dear brothers that's not black, let's say white, and we the same blood type, and it's life and death, and he need my blood, he gonna happily take my blood. My blood working him just like his blood working me. If we're matched. So I don't know I don't know why we can't wrap our heads around it, but I do know that there's a systematic call and responsibility that we as blacks have to take some ownership in our part of it too.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because that part we can control. That part we can control. And we can control how we support businesses and do businesses with others in our community. And we circulate our money in our community much longer than 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We spend we got $600 billion buying power. We spend more money than any other race, and we represent less than 12% of the population. Oh, and newsflash, we're not the highest earners.
No, but we spend a lot.
There's not a single business or product that don't market to the African American community. Why? Because we spend more than anybody.
Yeah.
Just saying. I'm gonna get off my bandwagon. I kick it back to you, Charles. You know, I get passionate about this.
Now, I think that's a good place for us to stop for today. I mean, I think there's a lot of it's good to acknowledge the history, but we have to go further.
Right.
And I mean, do the experiment that Killer Mike tried to do.
Yeah.
He tried to circulate his dollars in all black businesses. He had to do some research, but I mean, it was worth the effort. And it would be worth the effort for our listeners and viewers to just try it, because you may find some avenues that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah. And be patient. Please be patient.
Yeah.
And I'll offer this to you. If there's a business and a black business, and I'm talking to my people right now, if there's a black business that fails you, rather than just butchering them up, deal with them, talk to them, but do it in a way to get them better and let them know. Because anybody that wants to be good is going to receive that and want to get better, and give them an opportunity to get it right. Because we sure as heck give everybody else multiple opportunities to get it right. So we got to have the same behavior across the thing.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, I think this is as good a place as any to stop for today. Why don't we reverse roles? Why don't you take us out?
All right, y'all. Folks, it's Friday. Have a good weekend. As you go into your weekend, I want you to ponder a couple of things. Ask yourself, what can I do to circulate more money within my own community? Is there an option for me to buy this product or service from someone, or from small business or minority business that in my community? And number two, work to have more patience, understanding, to help businesses get better. If we fail you, help us get better, giving constructive criticism, feedback, and input. And do it with love. And if you can do that, we'll all be better for it. Until next week, have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.